Do you want to go for that question that I wouldn't answer in the tea break or not?
Yeah,
don't feel under, if you want to, don't feel under pressure.
I asked if it is possible that the I feeling, or however you call it, drops slowly, so you don't even recognize it.
Yeah, anything's possible. Absolutely, and there's no rules. There can't be any rules. Anything's possible. Another possibility is that the sense of I never really formed strongly in the first place. I think that's rare, but it happens. You know.
But then the cases who go to the psychotherapist to strengthen their ego.
Well, it's possible. I mean, that possibility where the sense of I never really formed strongly in the first place, it can cause biographical problems growing up because I'll use the term person, it's too difficult to keep being so careful with language. The person or the individual for whom that has, well, I was going to say that has happened, or rather has not happened, for whom that has not happened, kind of often finds it quite difficult to make sense of what everybody else is doing. It's like, why is everybody else so caught up in everything and so excited and miserable and about everything? Why is everything so dramatic for everyone? Because it's not like that for that individual. And so they can often feel quite isolated and alone as they're growing up. It's like, what's all the drama about? This is just a show, it's just a play, it's just a shadow, those kind of things. And sometimes, so then sometimes it can then be a crisis, as they're growing up, in late teens, early 20s or whatever, and then there might be a coming across this overtly, and then a sense of relief, that's what it is. That's why I've always felt so unlike everybody else. That's why I've never been able to get caught up in the drama in the way that everybody else is. It's not that I'm weird or mad or abnormal, it's just that there isn't a self there. And there's a story, I don't know how directly this connects, but I'll throw this in. You may have read Susan Siegel's story, Collision with the Infinite. And I read it a long time ago, but as I remember it, one of the turning points for her was she eventually found someone who understood what was happening to her, which she experienced as a terrible problem. But I think it was a Buddhist actually, that she eventually found. He basically said to her, what's happening to you? There are thousands of people out there who are craving what's happened for you. And it was at that point that she began to recognise that it wasn't a problem, if you like. You could say she began to recognise that it was a gift rather than a problem. So that can happen. I think I think that's rare. What I'm talking about, where the sense of self never really fully forms. I think there are a lot of cases where there is a seeing of this, or at least a glimpse of this in childhood. Often for no reason that I can fathom before puberty. So there is a seeing of this. It might just be a glimpse, it might be quite a clear seeing, but then it's forgotten. And then perhaps it's rediscovered later, But there's a kind of sense very, very deeply locked away in all of us, because one of the phrases that people often use when they come across this is, it feels like coming home, without being able to understand why that is or what it's about, but just that feeling of, at last, I'm coming home. So no rules, anything can happen.
They also speak about that it's a non-event when the ego falls away, or however you call it, and that some people don't even recognize it.
That's also possible.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you mention that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure there are individuals walking around who are no longer people, if you like, and have no concept about that whatsoever.
Really?
No philosophy.
Is there no comparison between?
Maybe, but you see, one of the things, if you talk to, I'm stopping because I can't think of a word to use or a phrase to use. If you talk to individuals who aren't there, who were there in the story of time and then they're not there, one of the commonalities that you might come across, at least in quite a few cases, is very, very difficult to remember what it was like. So if you like, I mean, I'm using language incredibly carelessly here. Please don't pin me down on this and argue with it or I'll burst into tears. But using language very carelessly, you know, if there's somebody who's a person and then they're not a person, and then you talk to the not a person, you ask them, what's the difference? It's usually they will find it very difficult to answer, partly because it's so evanescent, but partly because it's very difficult to remember. What we're talking about here is something that's very, very deep, but also very, very subtle.
And very natural.
Very natural as well. You could say, yeah, you could say that this is the natural way of being, that being a person is unnatural because it's full of tension and tightness and da-da-da. You could say that. So it's very, very difficult to remember, if you like, the flavour or the taste of what it's like to live with constriction once it's gone. It's so profound, and yet it's so subtle and evanescent.
But is it a more or less permanent state? I mean...
Well, there's no such thing as a permanent state.
Okay. Sorry.
But go on anyway. Sorry, I rudely interrupted you. Go on anyway.
No, but it's. I mean, it's nothing that is felt maybe for a few, I mean, for the person who became awake. You know, I mean, is he more or less? I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but I mean, is he in this? If it's not a state, whatever it is, I mean, in his natural, I mean, is the naturalness of this happening, I mean, does it endure all the time, or does the non-person steps out of it in a way and becomes a person for a few moments and then becomes again a non-person, or...
Anything's possible.
Anything's possible, okay.
Of course, in terms of like, does it endure, is there a permanent state? I've already referred to the Buddhists earlier today. The Buddhists are very, very good. They're just very simple description, very obvious description. Nothing endures. Everything is impermanent. One of the most obvious characteristics of existence is impermanence. You know, how long does a thought endure? How long does a feeling endure? A cup of tea might endure for a minute and a half. Nothing endures. Everything is, if you like, everything is flux, as the Buddhist points out. And there aren't any rules. And it's not a state.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay,
it's very difficult to, you know, we're struggling to put into language that which can't be put into language. Yeah.
Some people say it's a free fall.
Absolutely, they're totally, that's as close as you can get. It's a great saying, it's free fall. Somebody wrote to me years ago, they wrote to me saying this is falling, you know, free fall. You know, the bad news is that it's free fall, but the good news is there's no bottom to hit. So it's free falling forever. Yeah.
Well, there is this famous ending of a fairy tale, and they lived happily ever after. So that is probably in our subconscious quite strongly there, that there is a state that is happiness, that is freedom, that is bliss or whatever, and the criterion for the real being real is it will never end.
Yeah. Lovely.
And that's probably the
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And you started that off by referring to a fairy tale, which is exactly what it is, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely, lovely illusion. Yeah.
But anyway, something is like I don't know the word right now, not anymore reversible. There's no, you can't go back.
Anything can happen. In theory, at least. Anything can happen. There's no rules. There's no rules.
Okay.
And again, we're kind of, it's so difficult because we're talking about the questions and the answers and so forth. They kind of make sense if they relate to something called a state of being or something like that. And this isn't a state, it's not a state of being. We can't make sense of it in that way. We'd love to, we want to, the mind wants to. The mind's so imbued with these stories like the one you just mentioned. We want a state of, some sort of state of permanence, which is secure or happy, contented, blissful, whatever. And everything tells us that there's no such thing. There isn't even such a thing as a state. Everything is in constant flux. Everything is impermanent.
But there is a kind of relaxedness and lightness that is.
There may be. There may be. There may be, or not. Because there's no rules. We can talk about tendencies, if you kind of talk to the characters who, I can't finish that sentence, I was going to say who talk about this stuff, but that's just, obviously there's lots of characters who know perfectly well what we're talking about here, but they don't talk about it. But if you talk to a selection of characters who are left, if you know what I mean, what you'll almost certainly gather from that is there are tendencies, there are tendencies, that's all we can say. So maybe there might be more lightness, because those flies aren't sticking to the fly paper so much. And as I said earlier and yesterday, we're talking about an energetic shift. There's very little we can say about that, but one of the things we can say as a tendency is that in that energetic shift it's quite likely that a certain amount of neurotic energy will disappear. And then neurotic energy tends to make us quite heavy. But not all the neurotic energy might disappear. So is neurosis possible when this has been seen? Yes, of course. Of course. Going back to the beginning of the afternoon, just because of the stuff we were talking about time. It's kind of implicit in that if that happens, then there's likely to be more lightness. Our apprehension of time as something very real, past and future is very real, and the feelings that are attached to that, they can be a great burden, clearly. They can be a great burden. If you're a psychotherapist, you must earn some of your living precisely by dealing with the great burden that time is for people and the stories that attach to time. So if the sense of time collapses and the affect to do with time collapses, there's likely to be more lightness, more natural lightness. There's likely, but it's just a tendency perhaps for a preference for a quieter life. I get a lot of communication, I get emails, I get people ringing me up, I get people at meetings or whatever, and something's happened, they don't even understand what, all they know is they don't want to do very much anymore. Maybe this has a capacity for making individuals extremely lazy. I don't know what's happened, Richard. All I know is I don't feel depressed anymore, and all I want to do is watch DVDs all day. I'm saying that humorously, but that's real. That's real. There can be a fantastic loss of motivation.
Motivation.
Richard, how is it to address someone like Tony and someone like us? Is there a difference? Is the communication between so-called awakened people different from... I was just thinking the communication in a society, this is just a modern imagination of people with no I, who realize that there is no I, would be maybe totally different, maybe not.
I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. I would say, there's social communication is social communication. It's just, as long as the character that's left is still, there can be cases where there is virtually no social communication left. For example, there are cases where they're seeing and then nothing happens for 2 years. I don't know why it should be 2 years, but I've come across more than one story about that, some sort of cosmic law. It doesn't happen for everyone by any means, but there can be seeing and then literally just nothing happens for 2 years. Just sitting on a bench staring at the horizon maybe. Or perhaps that just makes a good story, I don't know, maybe it makes a good romantic story, but there are certainly cases out there that report that, right? So for 2 years, virtually no social communication, right? Then after that, there are cases, definitely there are cases, where social communication remains after that extremely limited. But then personalities are different anyway, and some personalities are much less sociable than others in any case. So again, there's no rules, there's no laws. Years ago, I knew her, and she was really sort of involved with spiritual organisations, but also very, very good, let's call it personal development trainer, in your own sort of like encountery style personal development group. She was brilliant at it, absolutely brilliant. I don't know whether she kind of saw this or had an inkling of this or not. It was too long ago, I didn't know anything about this then, but I'll tell you, she was crap at social chit-chat. Had a wonderful, amazing experience with her in a growth group, something like that. Tea break, she'd come and sit down next to you. Nothing. No ability to socialise in that sense. So people are different, Tony, a few of us meet up once a month in the cafe before his talks. It's, anything, I've rambled long enough now to have forgotten what your question was.
This question comes from my background as a spiritual seeker, with all the stories that have been told by all kinds of gurus about this question. I remember Osho said something like, if one enlightened master meets another master, there will be no talking at all. So another one said, well, I would never even go to someone else, I don't need that. So these stories are there still. Yeah, of course it's an old idea of awakening and what that means. And
in a way, any sentence or paragraph that starts when one enlightened master meets another enlightened master, it's time to turn tail and run as far as you can away from that. I will tell a little anecdote, if I can indulge myself. I will tell a little anecdote. I've spent a little bit of time, not very long, at Muktananda's ashram in Kaneshpuri. And I was only there for 5 weeks. And when I left, he must have been so bereft and shocked at my leaving that about a month later he died. He'd had several heart attacks already, but somehow my leaving the ashram must have affected him so much that he just had a fatal heart attack. But bizarrely, precisely the time I was there, and I was really, I was a really kind of wide-eyed spiritual seeker at the time, projecting massively onto guru figures and so forth. And bizarrely, at the time that I was there, this other guru figure turned up at the ashram, very old, and he'd come there to die. He had been another one of Nityananda's devotees, Nityananda being Muktananda's guru, and he'd been another one, so they'd kind of been together, contemporary, and this was also supposed to be a realised master, but unlike Muktananda, who was surrounded by thousands of adoring Americans and English people and Germans and Australians and so forth, this other great saint, enlightened master, had remained a jungle guru. You know, he just sort of remained in seclusion or whatever. Anyway, he was very old and he was fit to die. I don't know how they knew that. I suppose if you're an enlightened master, you know things like that. So he'd been brought by the few Indian devotees, because unlike Muktananda, we only had Indian followers. He'd been brought to Muktananda's ashram, and he was sort of put in this, I don't know what to call it, I'm tempted to call it a cage. Obviously it wasn't a cage, but like this kind of room that was sort of open. And I mean, looking back, we would then go and look at him and adore him, a little bit like people going to London Zoo to look at Guy the gorilla when he was there. And actually, this guy was very impressive. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, I'm sure he was about to die, but he didn't look it. He looked, and I don't mean this insultingly, I mean this as a compliment. He looked like Guy the gorilla. If you ever saw Guy the gorilla, he was a magnificent looking being. And this guy was a magnificent looking being, and he just sat there, staring back. And we devotees would go and sort of adore him and go and try and absorb the Shakti energy before he died and so forth. And I was very kind of naive and so forth, and I was sort of talking and adoring about how much, how pleased Muktananda must be that had this other great being there, and some of the other devotees who had been there a lot longer than me. I mean, there were people who'd been there 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 years, and so they looked at me as if I was mad. I don't think he does like him, because he was taking all the attention. And we were adoring him instead of Muktananda. I don't know, I'll never know the truth of that. But it's that thing, it's just, it's that projection, when two great masters meet. There's also the story about, which by the way I have absolutely no idea whether it's true or not, of when J.J. Krishnamurti visited Maharishi. It is said that they did not get on at all, and that when Krishnamurti left, Maharishi said that man should take a course of silence. Now I spread that simply as malicious gossip. I have no idea whether it's true, but it's one of the stories that was going around the spiritual circuit.
Yeah. Just this idea that
can I just add, you see, the point I'm trying to make is that great enlightened masters like Muktananda and so forth, they have personalities too. I mean, I'm putting that phrase, great enlightened masters, in air quotation marks if the camera didn't pick it up. But they have personalities too. It's just depending on our nature and the size of the adoring crowd, which in Muktananda's case was quite big. They do learn quite rapidly to keep their personality hidden.
Well, connected to this is this...
Apart from for certain very much favoured, beautiful female devotees. I won't go any further into that. Yeah, go on.
No,
I keep interrupting you because I have a wicked sense of gossip.
This, devotee of masters, there was always the question in the back, can they see whether I'm also enlightened or not? Or whether there is this I there. Can you see whether there is the illusion of an I still there?
If you rephrase it into a form of words which will get past the non-duality, please. So can they see whether there is seeing there or awake or whatever? I think the answer to that is in some cases yes, and in others no. Yeah, I mean sometimes I think by talking to someone Well, there's three possibilities. You talk to someone, and then it can be no, yes, it can be no, or it can be possibly. Yeah. Or as in the tradition might put it, it can be perfectly, I'm not sure if this is a traditional way of putting it, but it can be perfectly bleeding obvious if someone is really enmeshed in Maya.
And of course there are also in different traditions different ideas too of what it means, this realization. Maybe some yogi would see it as in an aura, some kind of light or something.
Yeah, absolutely. To which I, as one of probably the least psychic people on the planet, would just have to say, well, I don't know. Ask me about auras, I don't know. I might add, who cares, but... I mean, we can speculate endlessly, can't we? We can make up wonderful stories and then speculate and not know whether they're stories in the absolute sense or not. I don't know. I leave the psychic stuff to psychics. And then if you ask me what I think's going on, I will say I have absolutely no idea. I don't care either. I don't think we've said a word yet in this session that could possibly be allowed onto YouTube, have we? We're going to have to wipe this 3/4 of an hour, I think. Stories of shenanigans in Tananda's ashram. Well, I'm leaving the gun on that, actually. There is a serious point in there, though, and there's a serious point in what I was saying about the visiting dying Swami. I mean, what could be worse in terms of taking attention away from the master? What could be worse than having a visiting dying Swami? I mean, imagine if we had a visiting dying non-duality teacher here, or non-duality speaker, and you'd be thinking, well, he's dying, we can listen to Richard any time, but this guy, we've only got this afternoon, then he's going to be dead. How envious would I be? How jealous would I be? There is a serious point in there. It's about our tendency to projection. Depending on our temperament, our interests, our personality, we may project onto all sorts of different people, but if we are inclined towards the spiritual, we're drawn towards spiritual paths and so forth, then obviously we will, insofar as we are going to project, we will tend to project onto spiritual figures. And it's inevitable. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, there's nothing right with that. It's just a kind of psychological inevitability that until those projections die, they will be there. I know I'm stating the obvious there, but until those projections die, they will be there. And as long as they're there, there is no possibility of seeing, let's say, a figure like Muktananda. Just seeing Muktananda. There's no possibility of that as long as those projections are there. And there's no possibility of hearing some of the things that somebody like Muktananda said, which in a way, I'm not saying intentionally in this case because I don't know, which you could say are said deliberately to try to bust those projections, try and make those projections go away, like Muktananda, for example. I mean, Muktananda is very traditional, and there's activity all the time. There's early morning meditation, there's morning satsang, there's chanting, there's the study of Kashmiri Shaivite philosophy, then if there's seva for the guru, there's gardening, or there's cleaning toilets, or there's sifting rice, and there's lunch, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So from like early in the morning to quite late late at night, there's almost no free time. And the reason for that, in a way, is startlingly obvious. That if you get 2,000 people together in one place in India, many of whom are Westerners, they're going to get up to an awful lot of mischief if you don't keep them busy, tired, and on a low-protein diet. That's really important, because the low-protein diet, reduce their sex drive as much as possible, keep them busy, keep them tired, because otherwise 2,000 people in one place like that can get up to a huge amount of mischief. As we know, if we look at certain other spiritual places where they weren't kept so much under control. So you look at what happened with Osho and with, not that I'm making comparison, but nevertheless, like Jim Jones in Guyana and David Koresh in America. I mean, those are extremes, I know. But just looking in from the outside, this looks like this is a very, very strict and important dharmic path, and it's very, very service to the guru and so forth and so on. It's really important. You have to do the chanting, it clears your chakras, etc. You've got to do the meditation or whatever. Muktananda said, "You are all God, if only you knew it." And dharma, meaning the part, not meaning your own personal dharma, but dharma meaning what we do here in the ashram, is just a positive way of passing the time between birth and death. Now, how many of the 2,000 people gathered at Ganeshpuri heard that? Well, they all heard it, but nobody understood it. Or virtually nobody got it. Virtually nobody does it. And there is a story which I cannot authenticate, but I'm going to repeat anyway, because I love it and I want it to be true, and I hope it's true, which is that a group of Muktananda's kind of inner core eventually went to him after a long time, a long period of dharma and service and and just looked down and said, "There isn't anything else, is there?" Because the Siddha Yoga story is an incredibly magical story. The fact that it's called Siddha Yoga. What are Siddhas? Siddhas are powers. They're magical powers. Why would I get involved with something called Siddha Yoga unless I wanted to experience this magical, wonderful stuff where my Kundalini energy purifies my chakras and then I can walk through walls or whatever. And the story is that a group of his closest followers went to him and said to him, they didn't say to him, "It's all crap, isn't it?" But that's kind of what they meant. They said, "There isn't anything else, is it? It's just this." In other words, it's just the ordinary stuff. It's just this. And he said, "Yeah, it's just this, there's nothing else." And in the story that I have, they were really pissed off. And I don't know if that story is true, but I want it to be. I think that's great. It's lovely that he, if he said that, that's wonderful. And if we go with adoration and with that projection, why shouldn't the one sitting at the front go, "Yeah, bring it on, fine, And then if we go and say, "But it's all crap, isn't it?" Why shouldn't they say, "Yeah, of course it's all crap"? As I say, I can't authenticate that story, but I want it to be true, even if it isn't.